Welcome to a tutorial to install Windows Server 2016. We're going to do the desktop experience. So to get started, I'm going to go over some prerequisites that are going to be needed in order to install it. Requirements for Hyper-V: Windows 10 Enterprise, Pro, or Education. There's other operating systems that may be used. However, these are the basics it needs to run. A 64-bit processor with second level address translation, and a CPU support for VM monitor mode extension, and a minimum of 4 GB of memory. So for the actual operating system itself, Windows Server 2016 desktop requirements, we need a processor with 1.4 gigahertz, 64-bit, 512 megabytes of RAM, 2 gigabytes for desktop experience. Remember, there's two different ways that we can get this to be used. Desktop experience is obviously going to be using more RAM requirements versus Nano. Disk space, 32 gigabytes. That's the absolute minimum. Ain't be able to do much else with it once you get it up and running. You need a NIC with at least a gigabit throughput, compliant with PCI Express architecture specification, and it needs to be able to support the pre-boot execution environment, also known as PXE. Some other requirements that are only needed for certain features is going to be the Trusted Platform Module, graphics device and monitor capable of Super BGA or higher resolution, and UDI 2.3.1c based system and firmware that supports secure boot. And then lastly, this is just the system that I'm using. I'm using the Dell PowerEdge R710. I've got Windows Server 2016 already installed onto it, but we're going to do another installation of Hyper-V on the system. I've got 48 gigabytes of RAM and almost 11 terabytes of space. This should just help it install that much faster for us. I'll bring over our RDP into that machine. It's now on your screen. So here on the left, this site is what Ferris gives us to get our free software to use for stuff just like this. At the top, I've searched it down to the operating system category, Windows, 64-bit. Obviously, we want it to be in English. As we scroll down, we see a couple of different types of Windows Server 2016. I'm going to click on Data Center. It's going to open this up. You can download it down here, which I've already done. Click View Key, and oftentimes I'll take that and I'll copy it. So here's the copy one that I have. I'll go ahead and minimize that. This is Server Manager, Tools, Hyper-V Manager, so we can make another virtual box or virtual machine. Come over here, click on New, Virtual Machine, click Next. So for this, we have, I'm just going to give it the name. I'm going to call it Server 2016 underscore CITS 360, since that's a class we're doing this for. Now, the generations, a couple of things that we want to keep in mind for which generation of the virtual machine we want to choose. First off, we want to make sure that you are aware that once you change this setting, you cannot change it. This is one of the settings that it's a once and done. If you wanted to change it, you have to go back through and make an entirely new virtual machine. Now, some of the advantages of Gen 2 over Generation 1, you have higher performance, including higher CPU and memory limits, higher security with the Secure Boot and TPM, the Trusted Platform Module, more options such as PXE Boot with synthetic network adapter and boot from SCSI disk, more reliable VHDX virtual hard disk with higher maximum disk space, and you don't have the 2 terabyte disk space limit no more with the support of UEFI and GPT. Exceptions of when you want to use Generation 1 over Generation 2. Again, they wouldn't both be there if there wasn't a time that you want to use one over the other. If you're running an older 32-bit operating system that only supports Gen 1 VMs, so maybe you have a older legacy application that's still running on XP, this would be a place to do that. If you have older systems that don't support UEFI or don't have drivers for synthetic hardware, use Generation 1. If for some reason you use COM ports or floppy disks, or if you're migrating a VM to Hyper-V host based on Windows Server 2012, Windows Server 2008, or Azure Cloud that don't support Generation 2 VMs. We'll move on to, I'm going to click Generation 2. Memory, I'm putting 8,000 megabytes. I'm going to use dynamic memory for it. I do this with most of my machines so that way when I need it, I have it. I hate machines that take forever, and especially during installation instances, as we're doing now, I want it to kind of roll through it. Next. I'm not going to configure the networking right now. I'll go back through once I have the operating system installed, and I'll set this up there. I just find that if I do that after the fact, it just seems to help make the installation that much more easy for me to do. We call it what we call it. The size. Remember, you only need about 32 gigabytes for these machines to work as an absolute minimum. I'm going to up this to 150. I assume that this isn't going to be the only time that we will touch this virtual machine in this class. So I want to make sure that I have enough space to do the other things that we might need to do. Those at this time are unknown. But for the purposes of this, I'm going to up it a little bit, and I can always add more space to it later, but I'd rather just keep everything in one spot for now. I'm going to install the operating system later. There's some settings I want to go through, and if I don't set that up now, I'm going to forget. And here's what we got. So I'm going to click Finish. And here it is. Look, it's off. I'll go to Settings. There are some settings that you can only change when it's off. So one of them, down here in Integration Services, I like to make sure all these are checked. Mainly so that if I have something I want to pull from my host into my VMs, I can do that with a copy-paste, especially for links and stuff like that. Come back up here, Security Boot Enabled. I'm going to uncheck that. I'll recheck it later on, but when I first install stuff, I find that this can sometimes cause me issues. And the last thing I'm going to go do is look at this processor, make sure it goes to 2. Again, I hate stuff that takes forever to load. And then we're going to come in here to SCSI controller, make sure that DVD drive has been added, and then your image file. Image file you should use would be that one that I showed you earlier, so we'll go to it. And now it's in there, click OK. Right click on it. I always connect first, especially for the first installation. I'm going to click Start up here, and then it's going to run into press any key to start it, which is why I wait to click Start until I get connected to it. There's that press any key, so we're going to press it, and it begins to load. Pull my key up because I'm going to need that here in a minute. Click Next, Install Now. Copy, paste. Won't let me do it. XNT 88 JKW JCFNH YBH97M4HX. Next. Now I want to make sure we have the desktop experience for this particular version that we're doing for this video, so we can show you how to do the updates. We can show both ways of using PowerShell or using the GUI way of doing it with desktop experience, where if we do it the other way, we won't be able to show you the GUI way of accomplishing this. Accept the license terms. Upgrade or custom. Anytime that you are doing a fresh install, you'll always do a custom. You don't have anything that you're trying to keep. On most of your Windows systems, if you do the upgrade, you're going to end up with what's called a windows.old file. That's going to have all your previous users' information on it. So like if I go onto my other machine, come into C drive, I don't have one on this machine to show you. So what that's what it'll do is it'll give you a windows.old. This is what we created earlier. If we want to be bigger, we would put in a bigger number. This is okay. Next. And now we wait. And now as that's finishing up, alright, for this one password, because of what this is, we're just going to use something quick and easy to use. 1, 2, 3, capital CITS, 360, exclamation point. 3CITS, exclamation point, 1, 2, 3, CITS, 60, exclamation point. CITS 360 exclamation point. Didn't like that. Now, in order to do updates, they're really easy in this. We go to Start, and we're on the Server Manager. There's a spot in here for updates, show you when the last ran, when they're scheduled, all of that. There's a method for doing it through PowerShell as well, but this is going to be the easiest method to do it, especially in the desktop environment. Go on a local server. Make sure you're actually connected. You have internet access. If you're doubtful whether or not you're actually connected to the internet, or if it's just you're connected to your local network, one thing I like to do is I'm going to ping Google's public IP for their DNS. So I'm getting all stuff back, which means I am connected to the internet. Now, this being a server, the IP address that we give to it, we need to set static and do all that stuff. But for now, for the scope of this, we're just going to go ahead and do the updates. So download updates only. So it's currently set at. Wait for that dialog box to open. These are the ones that are available. So it's preparing to do the install. And down here we can change the active hours. We don't want to have our users trying to use this thing and they're slowed down because of what the active hours are. So I'm going to change those. These are normal working times. So this is when it's not going to actually do them through. So I'm going to save that. Restart options. When they finish installing them, when's it okay to restart? So I'm going to turn that on. It'll let me. Doesn't seem to want to move forward at this point, so what we're going to do is I'm going to come into I'm going to actually just do a restart to it and see if that'll jumpstart when we come back in. So we'll do planned. So on my host, this is what it looks like for the ones I want to update. These updates that are ready, I click install now, and it starts to go through the process of actually updating them. Let's set that one, my active hours, 8 to 5. Sometimes this might take a minute for it to go through. Once this is done, it'll either ask you to restart it, or depending on your settings, it'll automatically do a restart for you. Both of those are things that you can set, as I've shown you. And that concludes this tutorial.